Fate Be Changed, Chapter 36, Merida. All the pieces began to click into place for Merida as she stood outside the king's private chamber waiting for word from Eleanor about what had happened to King Douglas. As she paced back and forth along the corridor, Merida had glanced over at the shield bearing Clan McCameron's coat of arms. That was when she noticed it. In the center of the family crest, just underneath two crossed daggers, stood a mighty lion. On the day the sun reaches the height fairies cherish, those under the roar's rule will perish. Under the roar's rule, the lion, the head of Clan McCameron, was the one who roared and the one who ruled. Could it be that the puzzling words written on that parchment Fergus's men had found referred to King Douglas? It was a feeble explanation, but not implausible. The more Merida considered the threat, the more she wondered about the secret meeting she had happened upon between Eileen and the others. One of them had mentioned King Douglas. Was it possible that the threat was not from another clan, but from right here in this very castle? Why would you think this was not an accident? Eleanor asked. Although something in her gut told her she was on the right course, Merida hesitated to say more. She could not be certain that the conversation she had overheard between Eileen, Gregory, and the spy sent by Lachlan had anything to do with this incident with the king. It would be unwise, dangerous even, to level with a serious accusation without any proof. Besides, who would believe her? Her standing among the castle staff was already on shaky ground, with those like Elspeth raising suspicions about why she was still there. And she had garnered the ire of the king himself after her last outing with Eleanor, being banished to the kitchens. Who would take her word against two loyal servants who had spent their entire lives in service to King Douglas? No, she could not let Eleanor what she had overheard, not without being certain that those three were behind what had happened to the king. Merida? Eleanor asked. I asked you, why would you think this was an accident? What else could it have been? Of course you were right, Merida said. Do not mind me. I am just tired. The princess stared at her with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. She tilted her head to the side, her eyes narrowing as she studied Merida's face. Merida's anxiety grew with each second that passed. As much as she loathed the scullery, she yearned to escape to it. Anything to avoid the challenging look the princess had leveled her way. I do not think so, Eleanor said after some time. I believe there is something you are not telling me. What is it, Merida? What do you know about Father's accident? It would have been dangerous to accuse Eileen and the others of attempting to harm the king, but she could still tell the princess what she had overheard and allow her to draw her own conclusions. Eleanor must understand that her future betrothed was not to be trusted. I do not know anything about the king's accident, Merida started. But you were right, princess. There is something I have withheld from you. It's about Locke. What are you doing here? They both turned at the sound of Queen Katerina's caustic voice. Mother, Eleanor squeaked, clearly caught off guard by the queen. Merida had not heard her leave the king's parlor either. How is father? Eleanor asked. The queen ignored her. She honed in on Merida. You were warned to stay in the kitchens, Queen Katerina said as she advanced. It is because of you that the princess was seen in a compromising position with a Dunbrock. Eleanor gasped. I have not been compromised by the Dunbrock. Silence, the queen snapped. Not another word. She turned her attention to Merida. Have you any idea the scandal it will cause if the news that the Princess of McCameron Kingdom has seen with a Dunbrock were to make its way around the villages? I thought there was a peace alliance, Eleanor asked. Queen Katerina blasted her daughter with a blistering stare. Merida's heart jumped into her throat. Why would Eleanor openly challenge her mother this way? She must have known how the queen would react. But it was clear that Eleanor no longer cared about her mother's reaction. You are not to be near the princess for the rest of your time here, the queen said. If I learn that you have disobeyed my orders, I will have you tossed out of the castle. I do not care what dangers may be out in the forest, and once the Highland Games have concluded, you are to leave this castle and never return. She stared down at Merida, and with a voice that broke no argument, asked, Have I made myself clear? Merida swallowed and nodded. Yes, Queen Katerina. She looked to the princess. Eleanor? Yes, mother, Eleanor answered. Satisfied, the queen nodded brusquely and said, "Have Bridget ready the green velvet ground for tonight's dinner. The Fraser and your future betrothed will be here soon." Merida nearly growled at the mention of Lachlan Fraser. To know that her mother was only days away from being betrothed to such a scoundrel made her blood run cold. Thank goodness the union would not take place until after the reading of the marriage banns, which was done in each of the 3 Sundays prior to the wedding. Still, an official betrothal will make it much more difficult for Eleanor to pry herself from Lachlan. They both stood there and watched as Queen Katerina took her leave. Eleanor started to walk away, but Merida caught her arm. She was willing to risk the queen's ire if it meant warning Eleanor about Lachlan Fraser. But the princess was having none of it. She glanced quickly at Merida and then to her mother, shaking her head. "Eleanor," the queen called out, not bothering to look back. The princess wrenched her arm free from Merida, but before she could walk away, Merida imparted a final warning. "Be careful," she whispered.